It was a stormy night, the kind where the city streets glistened under yellow streetlights, and every passing car sent ripples across deep puddles. Marcus Williams, a 52-year-old black taxi driver, pulled his worn cab to the side of the road. He had been driving for nearly 12 hours straight, his body aching, his eyelids heavy, but his spirit unshaken. He had done this for 3 decades, serving strangers, listening to their hurried stories, and carrying lives that often never noticed him. But tonight, something sat in the back of his taxi that would make the world notice him. When his last passenger, a sharply dressed businessman, stepped out without so much as a thank you, Marcus sighed and reached for his coffee. Then his eyes caught something, a sleek black leather wallet, resting against the seat. He frowned, picked it up, and flipped it open. Inside were platinum credit cards, thick stacks of crisp bills, and a driver's license with a name that made Marcus pause. Richard Langston, a real estate millionaire, famous for building half the city's skyline. For a long moment, Marcus sat frozen, the rain tapping steadily against the windshield. That wallet could pay his rent, fix the car that was falling apart, and buy his daughter new shoes so she wouldn't have to wear the worn-out pair that made her classmates whisper. Temptation burned in his chest. Nobody would know. No one had seen. But Marcus knew the weight of perception. He had lived long enough to understand how quickly a black man's character could be judged, how one mistake could be twisted into a story of greed and dishonesty. Keeping the wallet wasn't just a risk. It was a label he might never escape. He placed the wallet on the passenger seat and whispered, "What kind of man do you want your daughter to believe you are?" And in that single question, his choice became clear. Next morning, Marcus drove to the gleaming tower that bore Richard Langston's name. The lobby was lined with marble, the kind of place Marcus only ever saw when dropping off wealthy clients. As he walked in, holding the wallet in his hand, every head seemed to turn. A security guard eyed him closely, suspicion sharp in his gaze. "I'm here to return this," Marcus said quietly, lifting the wallet. The guard narrowed his eyes. "You found that?" Marcus nodded. "In my cab. Belongs to Mr. Langston." The man looked at him skeptically before making a call. Moments later, Richard Langston himself appeared. Tall, confident, with silver hair and a designer suit. He looked down at Marcus, his eyes narrowing first at the wallet, then at the man holding it. "You found this?" Richard asked. "Yes, sir. Back seat of my taxi last night." Richard opened it, checked everything, and let out a small laugh. "Unbelievable, everything's still here." He looked at Marcus for a long moment, then shook his head. "Do you realize what most people would have done?" Marcus swallowed. "I know what I had to do." Richard studied him, as though trying to decide if this man was naive or extraordinary. And then he said something that stunned Marcus. "Come with me." Marcus followed Richard through glass doors into a sprawling office with a view of the entire city. For a man who had spent his life behind a steering wheel, the sight felt almost unreal. Richard leaned against his desk, wallet in hand, and asked, "Tell me something, Marcus. Why didn't you keep it?" Marcus hesitated. "Because my daughter looks up to me, and because I know what it feels like to be judged for something you didn't do. I couldn't add truth to those judgments." For the first time, Richard's sharp expression softened. He nodded slowly. "You know, people with more than enough money still manage to lose something far greater: integrity." He reached into the wallet, pulled out a thick wad of cash, and extended it toward Marcus. "Take it, for your honesty." Marcus shook his head. "I can't." Richard's eyes widened. "You're turning down money?" "I didn't bring your wallet back for a reward," Marcus said. "I brought it back because it was the right thing to do." For a man used to negotiations and deals, Richard found himself strangely speechless. Over the next few weeks, Marcus thought that was the end of it. He continued driving his taxi, carrying passengers who barely noticed him, returning home to his daughter, and quietly enduring the grind. But then, one afternoon, he received an envelope slipped under his apartment door. Inside was a card with Richard Langston's signature and a note. "Some people lose money and never care. Others lose faith in humanity. You've given me mine back. Call me." Against his better judgment, Marcus dialed the number. To his surprise, Richard invited him to dinner. At first, Marcus thought it was a joke, but that evening, he found himself in a restaurant he could never have afforded, sitting across from a millionaire who now looked at him not as a stranger, but as an equal. "Marcus," Richard said, "I've met plenty of businessmen, but I've never met someone who reminded me what it means to stand for something. You didn't just return a wallet. You reminded me of dignity." But the story didn't end there. Word of Marcus's act eventually spread. Local news picked it up. Strangers began hailing his cab not just to ride, but to meet the man who had done the impossible in a world driven by greed. Some praised him. Others questioned why a man struggling financially would return something so valuable. And Marcus, in every interview, said the same thing. Because sometimes the world needs to be reminded that integrity still exists. In the end, Marcus didn't just return a millionaire's wallet. He returned something far greater: the belief that dignity, honesty, and courage still have a place in this world. As he drove his taxi through the glowing streets at night, the city felt different. He was still the same man, still carrying strangers to their destinations. But now, behind the wheel, he carried something more powerful: the knowledge that one choice, one decision, had changed not only his life, but the way others would see men like him. And maybe, just maybe, it had changed a millionaire too. Ending call to action. So, what would you have done if you were in Marcus's place? Would temptation have won, or would integrity guide your choice? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us of the power of humanity.